Hi, I'm John from Gentleman and Whiskey, and if you like this bottle but can't find it, here's 5 alternatives for you to try. I know some of you are already groaning, and that's fine. We're starting a new kind of series. We started with Weller Antique because that's one of my favorites of the Buffalo Trace lineup. A lot of people have asked for Blanton's alternatives, so here they are. But before we go through that, I kind of want to go through what Blanton's actually is and how I view it. So, to find out what Blanton's actually is, you gotta try it. And I gotta be honest, it has been a while since I've actually had a pour of Blanton's. Gentlemen and Whiskey, the tasting groups, this is our kind of Stanley Cup. We all take a drink out of it during our important events, whether that be weddings or birth of children, buying new houses, stuff like that. So we've got names on the bottles. I'm not sure if you can really see that or not, but you know, we all sign it. It's a cool thing. It's a show bottle. It's a great package. And they have fantastic marketing. So Blanton's is from Buffalo Trace. If you did not know, I'm repping my Buffalo Trace clone tonight. And it is their higher rye mash bill, or mash bill 2. We don't really know what the mash bill is, except that it's higher rye. The rumor is that it's around 12 to 15% rye. It is all single barrels from Warehouse H, which is a metal-sided warehouse, roughly 6 to 8 years old. It's bottled at 93 proof for the regular offering. There are other offerings. We're not talking about those today. We're just talking about the straight, plain, old, horsey Blantons. So we're going to go through what the profile actually is, and then I'm going to give you my pre-planned 5 alternatives, and we're going to roll from there. Cheers. So on the nose, I get a lot of grape usually. I get cherry, orange marmalade, something like that off of Buffalo Trace stuff. It's generally fruit forward. And then I've got like some leather, some brown sugar, some oak, a little bit of vanilla. And I mean, they're single barrels. So everyone's a little different. You may, at some point in your life, come across one that's an absolute honey barrel and the best bottle you've ever had. That is the fun and the excitement of single barrels. Blanton's isn't something that I reach for often, but I do enjoy it. I enjoy it almost every time I have it. It's not something that's going to blow you away. Generally, there are going to be people who have had this for the first time and fall for the hype, fall for the tatering, and that it's going to be their favorite bottle ever. And there are going to be people who legitimately love Blanton's. That's not a mark necessarily of somebody who doesn't like bourbon. That's not a mark of somebody who is young in their whiskey journey. Some people just like Blanton's, and that's okay. For all the toxicity that's in groups surrounding whiskey right now, you are allowed to like Blanton's. Some of us don't. Honestly, I think it is a great product, but it's definitely not my favorite thing. So we're going to give it a taste. Oh, okay. Fruit forward, I would say it's closer to like an apple juice with cherry. Loads of oak, loads of leather, definitely earthy notes, and then it's followed through with like brown sugar. Just kind of finishes with that oak, and that's something that I generally enjoy. I like a bourbon that finishes with a good bit of oak. Classic bourbon flavor profile. So what I think Blanton's actually is. This is one of the most, if not the most, tatered after bottles. People love it. People go nuts for it. PA Bourbon Squad lights up every 6 weeks when Blanton's drops in stores. What I think this is, ultimately, an experience. You see it all over pop culture. It's been in everything from John Wick to How I Met Your Mother, one of my favorite shows. It's funny looking back and watching every once in a while on the bar scenes at McLaren's. You can see a Blanton's on the shelf. It is an icon, right? It is a fancy horsey bottle. It's FOMO in a bottle. People want to find these. People want to get all 7 of the toppers. I think it's 7. BLANTONS. So 8. Send in 8 of your toppers and get a custom stave for it. That's a cool thing. Buffalo Trace is a master at marketing. I've had this conversation with my friend Sherry a bunch of times. This is one of the best marketed bottles out there. And I do think it is closer to a luxury experience. It's closer to a Patron tequila, an icon, right? You walk into a bar, and if they have Blanton's on the menu, it feels like the luxury option. This is a luxury bourbon, not necessarily for people who like bourbon. That's why a lot of bourbon people think the sentiment is that as you get more into bourbon, you will grow out of this Blanton's phase. And that's just not true for some people. Some people like to sit down and enjoy a pour that they don't have to pick apart, and that honestly can be this. Or it can be a very complex pour. It's all different to different people. So now that we've talked about that, now that we've zeroed in on the fruity and earthy and woody profile, here's 5 bottles that I think are alternatives to this for different reasons. And we'll go through what those different reasons are. So, gonna kind of slide this to the side, and we're gonna go with number 1. Number 1, we did this as an alternative to Blanton's in a blind early on in Gentleman and Whiskey's catalog. Pretty sure that video was early 2021. It was before I learned anything at all about being a filmmaker. So it is, for me at least, kind of rough to watch, but if you want to watch it, it is linked up above. Price-wise, Old Forester 1910 is right there in the $50 to $60 range, depending on where you're buying it. Blanton's should be around that price range. It is, I think, $68 here in PA now whenever it drops. I understand the rarity. I totally get it. It is a little disingenuous for me to value it at sub $70 when there are tons of places where it's $150 in stores. I get that, right? It should be $70 though. As far as taste-wise, this is fruity and earthy, and I think it's gonna give you very similar type notes. Definitely is probably a little sweeter, probably a little bit more vanilla. It depends on the batch of 1910, because I have talked about this many times. I don't think Old Forester has great batch consistency. I think some batches are great, some batches are just okay, and that is all across all of their products. To me, this is one of my earliest comparisons, and I think the comparison still stands. It's close in price, it's close in taste, and it's much more available. So, that is number 1. Number 2, pretty much the same thing. Elijah Craig Toasted Barrel. It is 94 proof, so it's right in that proof range. It's about $50 to $55, probably cheaper than the 1910, and about $10 to $20 cheaper than Blanton's. This is one that I am conflicted about because I don't like it nearly as much as Blanton's, but I think especially in the earthy notes, if that's what you seek for Blanton's, I've had single barrels of Blanton's that were overwhelmingly earthy. That's going to be the comp here. This is overwhelmingly earthy to me, and it has really few other flavors. If you're looking for a good earthy bottle, this is it. I think this is an alternative to the earthy flavors in Blanton's. So, that's number 2. Number 3 is a much cheaper alternative. So this is Green River's Bourbon. I'm a pretty big proponent of Green River. Blue Note Bourbon and Wheel Horse are sourced through them. I am big fans of those bourbons, and I think this is very similar in profile. I was initially a little bit disappointed with how it is. It's much earthier than I wanted it to be, but I think as an alternative to Blanton's, it is all but perfect. It's very grape forward. It's very earthy, leathers, tobaccos, oaks, and it's extremely smooth. Burn is not really something that I focus in on, but it is a noticeable lack of that with Blanton's, and I think this Green River is the same way. It's extremely easy drinking. I could probably crush a bottle of this in a weekend, no problem. I think this is, as far as I'm concerned, probably the closest taste comparison to Blanton's, even though they're not related at all. The mash bills are very different. Green River runs a 70-21-9, 70% corn, 21% rye, 9% malted barley. The end result, I think, is very similar. Also, the bottle is in the shape of a horseshoe, so that's kind of horsey related. Horsey bourbon, horsey bottle, kind of cool. That's my number 3. At number 4, I know this will make some of you happy, it'll make some of you angry, and that's fine. This is Russell's 10-year. It is 90 proof. It's about $40-$45, something like that. You'll notice a running theme of a lot of these bottles are less expensive than Blanton's. Part of that is because none of these are single barrels. There is generally a little bit of a markup on single barrels because they have to be a specific flavor profile, and it's hard to blend out those impurities, so they have to be some of your more higher end bottles. So this is, I think, close in that it's very fruity. It's a little funky. It's some of that like orange marmalade, copper pot still funk. I think that if you like Blanton's, there's a good chance that you'll like Russell's 10, and it's very available. Some could also argue that maybe Wild Turkey 101 is an even closer comparison. I think this, for people who like Blanton's and want it for that smooth, easy drinkability, this will probably be closer than Wild Turkey 101. This is close to what you're looking for, and I think it's a great alternative to Blanton's. So that is number 4. Before we get to what I think is the closest comparison altogether, all things considered, I'm going to talk about one that I think a lot of people have said is an alternative to Blanton's. that I do not agree with. And I'm going to tell you why. So, one that I think people talk about pretty frequently as an alternative to Blanton's is John J. Bowman Single Barrel. It is from Buffalo Trace. The rumor is that it's a mix of Mash Bill 1 and Mash Bill 2. I'm sure somebody in the comments can tell me if I'm right or wrong with that, but that is the most recent rumor that I've heard. They take Mash Bill 1 from Buffalo Trace, Mash Bill 2 from Buffalo Trace, and they mix them and then redistill them in their own copper pot still. It is definitely pot stilled. It is, in my opinion, closer to Wild Turkey 101 or the Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit than it is to Blanton's. The main reason why I don't think this is a comparison is because Blanton's, I think, drinks around its proof. I think it is picked specifically for people who are not necessarily bourbon people. Bourbon people, I think, are going to pick this probably close to 10 times out of 10 over Blanton's. But I do not think it is an alternative to Blanton's because it is brash. It is bold. I think quite a few of these single barrels drink closer to the 107, 110 proof range than actually 100. If you're a bourbon person wanting to move past Blanton's, sure, absolutely. Go to John J. Bowman Single Barrel next. Go to Henry McKenna 10-year next. That is, I think, an evolution, but I don't think it's an alternative. So, that being said, take this off the table. And I don't actually have a bottle of number 5 currently, but I think the closest alternative to Blanton's in price, in taste, and all around everything is Michter's Bourbon. I generally get a lot of fruit notes. I get a lot of earthy notes. I get a little bit of those like orange marmalade or the copper pot still notes. It's very close in proof. It's 91.4 proof. It's close in price. It's usually around 50, 55 bucks, something like that. So it is a little bit cheaper. You are looking for an alternative for other people in your life. I think Michter's is going to be one that you can confidently bank on that if they like Blanton's, they will also like Michter's. So that is my list of 5 bottles that I think are alternative to Blanton's and one that I think people commonly do that is not an alternative. Please tell me what your alternatives are. Tell me if you don't like my list. I'm completely fine with criticism. I love having these conversations. If you're just commenting, though, that these aren't alternatives, please bear in mind that you are watching this, and that's great. I really appreciate it. But if you don't think these are alternatives, please comment below. Tell other people what you think alternatives are. So if they didn't like my list either and they don't think anything's close to Blanton's, they can check your comments. If you like this content, check out our other videos. Please like and comment on this video. Tell us what videos you want to see next. Always interested in making fun videos that the community suggests. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and we hope you'll join us in drinking like a gentleman. Cheers. So, I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to do that. That looks prettier. Turn it so that you can see the T, and it's not the left-facing horsey.